you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen, amen. So we are ready to la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Get busy.
To engage, to soak ourselves in words of Torah. Last week we tried an interesting practice as we were studying the concept of ownerlessness, which I won't go into now, but many of you were there last week. But I will say it is what it sounds like. And what we did is we engaged in listening to understand as opposed to listening to reply. And I thank Michaela for that wonderful sort of phrase to kind of express what I was trying to get at. So what I want to invite, we're going to keep trying different iterations of this. What I want to invite you to do is to, when you do have something to say, to start with either a line of text or something that someone else has said. Okay, so it's going to take real deep listening for all of us. So I'm excited about this. And I'm going to start with a poem that reflects this concept, and I hope expands it for this moment. So I'm going to share my screen, see if we can find the text. There it is. So today we're going to look at the ordeal of the suspected adulteress called the Sotah. And I will say, and these days we call it a trigger warning, it's a very difficult text. It's a cruel text. It's a mean text. It's a text full of pain. So I just want to say that in case, someone wants to opt out now. But before we get there, we're going to read a poem by Yehuda Amichai, a beautiful poem called The Place We Are Right. From the place we are right, where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. So for me, this poem is particularly apt at this moment because there's so many voices in the Jewish community and beyond that are taking a stand and a stance regarding what is going on in Israel and Gaza. And what is undeniable is the pain that is characterizing the situation. But there's nothing else, at least to me, that is completely evident and obvious. I have a hard time engaging in conversation where people want to be right, especially when I have no idea what is right. That's an overstatement. I guess I have some ideas, but this is not the place for that. Why I'm introducing this poem now is I want us to, if we can, not speak from that place. Not speak from that desire to be right, but to go back to the place from which we are listening to understand. Okay. I think we will see that this poem is resonant with the texts that we're going to be studying about Sotah. Strangely enough, I didn't intend it that way, but it turned out that it's really resonant. So let's just name some elements here. So one is nothing grows in that place from where we are right. It's kind of a dry place. He doesn't use the word dry, but it's dry. It's hard and trampled like a yard. But there's something about doubt and love that dig up the world or dig up the earth. And it's not clear what that digging up yields, but it does dig it up. It opens things up. It doesn't leave them hard and impermeable. And then we end with a whisper being heard in the place where the house, right, the Beit HaMikdash, the sacred house once stood. Okay, so we're going to come back to this, but right now I'm going to open up for any quick comments. And again, the practice right now will be refer to a line, refer to a word from this poem. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share, see if people have something to say. Hold on. So please raise your hand in Zoom. Someone asked me why I have stopped their video. I did not mean to, not at all. Michaeli, see if there's an issue with Stephen Rudin's video, please. He seems to be having a problem.
Everyone should be able to start their video now. That setting was changed.
I'm going to ask people, this is not a session, and I'm sorry if I was unclear. I don't want to discuss what's going on in the Middle East. We're going to be talking about Sota today. What I wanted to open up with is a challenge to speaking from that place where we are sure we are right. That's all I meant to say about that. So I didn't mean to say anything else. So I'm going to shift it away from the Middle East. That's not what we're talking. If you have something to say about that, this is not the place for it. And there are plenty of places to talk about that. Okay, so for comments, Paul Solomon.
Yeah, just quickly, that if love is akin to a plow, then love is embracing the fertility of the earth, and life can flourish.
Mm. Beautiful. So love is a plow. And extending that, like broadening that to the environment and how we treat the earth. Thank you. Okay. All right, I'm going to do a lineup, and then I'm going to close it. We're going to go to the next text. Okay. So, and I'm going to ask you to make quick, pointed comments. One point, not two. Okay. Asher Chaim, Beth, Yaakov, Mark, Daniel, Jerry. Please remember or help me remember that lineup, and then that's it for now.
Love like a plow, plus Diracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom. About the Torah, its paths are paths of pleasantness and peace. And from Pirkei Avot, hafoch ba, keep digging in it, because eventually you'll find everything in it. This is a very, very difficult text, and I've been plowing it for decades. And I think there are even glimmers of its paths are paths of peace, if we can keep digging.
Beautiful, beautiful. So turn her over and over. Like, so what we're doing now as we're studying is plowing, right? Is sort of finding openings. Michaeli, two things. I think people are only able to chat me directly and not to everybody, because I keep getting direct chats, which
People
I think
are able to chat everyone.
Okay,
publicly
that's
as
good,
well.
number one. And number two, can you put the link for the source sheet in the chat for everybody so they can access it themselves? Thank you. Okay, Beth and Yaakov, Mark, Daniel, Jerry. Go ahead. You can't. Beth Brown, please unmute Beth Brown. Okay. There you go.
There you go. I'm living in a ruined house, and I'm thinking about, is there a way that I can use love to unruin it?
Mm. Mm. Beth, that really touches me. Thank you. The simplicity of what you said, very powerful. Yaakov.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom. It struck me very quickly from the poem that where he speaks about flowers not growing. In spring, flowers don't grow. That it's not about nature. It's not about. It's about something so destroyed, something that doesn't bring flowers. And for me, that's the destruction, the destruction of the temple. You had kind of alluded to that. You had mentioned that we wonder what happened. We wonder. We dig. We hear a whisper of what it was about. Right? How did we go wrong? What was right? What happened here? And this is the kind of it's this kind of question of that we need to kind of about being right. being right is in such a moment is where we are, and maybe alludes to our time now, to your beginning talking about our situation. That's what being right, where people don't listen to one another, don't listen to what is the other person talking. People are so adamant about being right that that's what we came to. We came to that destruction that affected us as a whole people, as a whole. And there's no spring, there's no flowers there. Even though you dig and you dig, and what happened there? Why? What was right? What's wrong?
So Amichai himself ends with the ruined towns, right? With the Beit HaMikdash. So it wasn't me alluding to it, was Amichai.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But that's okay. Yeah, I love how you're expanding the metaphor. Like, we're standing on this ground that was once sacred, and how do we touch that sanctity again? And Amichai is implying that we do it by listening, by reconnecting, yes. and by using love, right? By using the plow of love.
I love that.
Yeah, thank you. Mark Allen Horn, yeah.
Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. I was just thinking two things, even though you asked for one. The first thing is I was thinking about something a teacher of mine used to ask, which I'm sure everybody's heard this phrase, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And I certainly recognize all of the times in myself when I harden, like that trampled ground, when I harden into a position and I can't be happy because I just can't come out of that place. And I just was wondering if you had a comment or a thought about why Amichai named this poem Method.
Oh, he did. Sorry, that was my naming it. I named each source. So this source is like our method. This is an introduction to the session, which is also, it's the heart of the session. So there's no method. I think it's called The Place We Are Right, if you look a little bit below.
I see.
Sorry about that confusion.
Okay, thank you.
I love how we interpret our mistakes, right? That we built a whole tradition on that.
Oh.
I also want to point to I'm not reading the chat because it's too much for me, but I did see that Jay, I think, put in the words from Rumi. Is that right? Yeah. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. So it's so in conversation with Amichai's poem. Thank you. Okay, Daniel, Jerry, and then to another text.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
So I imagine that this poem was written in Hebrew.
Yes.
That the word place, makom, probably shows up in this poem.
It does.
And I just wonder how it would read in Hebrew, because makom is one of those gorgeous names for the divine. And also at the end, that word whisper kind of gives a sense of hope, that there's a divine whisper, a bat kol in the makom, and everything is a makom. Even when people are constricted, I'm constricted in a place of rightness, the divine is still there too. Every place is a makom, even the most constricted places. So just wondering how this would have sounded in Hebrew, if some of the words for makom or even the word right, is that yashar?
Daniel, I'm going to read it to you. Min hamakom, from the place, shebo anu sodikim, from the place we are right. So that's number one. Number two is that word for plowing is resonant with whisper. Charish u'lechisha. Right, so there's no bat kol, but you're totally right about makom, and I think it's sort of, the resonance are justifiably amplified. But we're going to go.
It seems to end in a hopeful note.
It does.
Maybe.
Yes, a limited hopeful note.
Yes, a little whisper.
Yeah.
Which is the open.
Yeah. Okay, Jerry.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Rabbi Diane. It's always so pertinent. I'm grappling with this and about being right in a very hurtful, dangerous situation with my brother, but working on, do I want to be right? And I see that that's when, and I just bought flowers for my windowsill. So how do those flowers grow? You know, I'm compassionate with them and I water them and I give them sun and I'm soft with them too. But this grappling with I love when from the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. And I look at my self-righteousness and my narrow-mindedness and my hard-heartedness, even not turning to God and not having humility and compassion, because it's only harming me. It's only harming me and others around me. So the weeds and the frozen earth and the rocks are old hurts and pain to me.
Jerry,
So
that's amazing. And what's coming up from me and also from what Mark said is Pharaoh's hard heart. I mean, you just referred to it, and thinking about the hard trampled earth and Pharaoh's, hard, tight heart. And, there was a time, and I still go there at moments, where I felt like I was being consumed by resentment. And I just decided, I don't want to be this person. It was so hard to move out of that place. Like, I think there's something we get out of that hard, impermeable place. And there's something about it that's, at least my experience, is safer. Okay, we're going to go on. As I promised, Kathy Lynn, we're going to get you after the next text. So the next text is big, and we're not going to spend the whole time on it. What we're going to do, wait, I'm going to share. It's the sotah. It's the ordeal of the sotah. It's the passage that we're going to look at directly from the parsha. Hold on, I'm having a little problem here. And, as I said before, but anyone who wasn't here, I just want to say again that it is a difficult text. And of course, I cannot find it. This is it. I think I found it. No, wait a second. Okay, do people see it? Yes?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. All right, so we're not going to parse this. We're not going to go deep into the language, not too deep, because I really want to look at some of the ideas that will be brought out by some midrashim and commentary that we're going to look at after this. God willing, we'll have time for everything. So let's just set this up. So this is the case of the suspected adulteress. There's nothing in the Torah about the suspected adulterer. And as you know, polygamy was permitted. So there's no question here of a man's, sinfulness, complicity, crime. We're just focusing on the woman. And again, it's a really difficult text. It's an example of a text in the Torah where you don't know what happened because there are no witnesses. So there's this ordeal that the Torah, I'm sorry, it's a lot of information, just trying to figure out what's relevant here. So the punishment for adultery is death. But in this case, there are no witnesses. So you can't put the woman to death. So what happens? There's this terrible ordeal by which to find out if she's guilty or not. Now, some scholars say, including Jacob Milgram, great 20th century Bible scholar. I don't remember the year of his death. It might be the 21st. He might have lived into the 21st century. He said that this ordeal is actually designed to save a woman's life, because otherwise a man would just suspect adultery and, his wife would be killed. So here's this ordeal that in a way seems almost designed to exercise his jealousy. So let's go through it. I'm going to take some impressions about what it is once we read through it. And then hopefully we'll have time for one more text after this. Okay, so speak to the Israelite people and say to them, if any man, I'm going to read some of the Hebrew, but not all of it. If any man's if any man's wife has gone astray and broken faith with him, in that a man has had carnal relations with her, unbeknown to her husband, and she keeps secret the fact that she's defiled herself without being forced. In other words, it wasn't a rape, and there is no witness against her, right? So here, v'ne'elam me'enei isha, and she's hidden from the eyes of her husband. V'nistarahi, and again, it's another word for being hidden.
Excuse me, Rabbi Diane.
Yeah.
We can't see the text that you're reading on screen. We can only see the top. We can only see the top of the title on the Sefaria page.
Callie. I don't know why. I'm sort of, do you want to screen share?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the share. Thank you for telling me, and I'm sorry, everybody, that you could not see it. Okay, so we're going to read 2 and 3. Let's see, Michaela. Okay, right there. Stop. Can you make it bigger? Okay, so here's okay, great, perfect. So in verse 14 now, va'avar alav ruach kin'ah. So there came upon him like a spirit, a fit of jealousy. It almost seems like he's being possessed in some way. V'kinei et ishto, and he's jealous of his wife. And this verb used for jealousy is a very, common one in the Bible. And sometimes it means vigilance, and often it means jealousy. And, God is also jealous, especially when, Israel goes astray or Israel worships other idols. Not other idols, worships idols, other gods. And he is wrought up about the wife who has defiled herself. So again, ruach na is used twice here, the spirit of jealousy. So either she has defiled herself or she hasn't, and we have to figure out which one it is. So now we're going to go to the right, the specific ordeal to determine whether she's guilty or not. Okay, so the man shall bring his wife to the priest. Okay, so, and here it's interesting because the hevi ha'ish et isho el hakohen. Hold on, no, here. The hikriv ota hakohen. So in 16, the priest brings her close to God, and it's reminiscent of a korban, right? He brings her close. But sorry, I skipped. He shall bring as an offering for her 1/10 of an ephah of barley flour, which is considered a very plain kind of offering. With no oil shall be poured upon it, and no frankincense shall be laid on it. So it's this very unadorned, very basic kind of offering. For it is a meal offering of jealousy, a meal offering of remembrance, which recalls wrongdoing, right? Maskeret avon. And when I see wrongdoing, I wonder, I don't think the Torah means this, who's wrongdoing? Is it the husband's jealousy, or is it her adultery? Okay, so then as I said, the priest shall bring her forward. And then here's where it gets really interesting. The priest shall take sacred water in an earthen vessel. So mayim kedoshim. And taking some of the earth that is on the floor of the tabernacle, the priest shall put it into the water. After he has made the woman stand before the Lord, the priest shall bear the woman's head. So covering her head is a sign of modesty, and bearing it can be a sign of immodesty. It can also be a sign of grieving. And place upon her hands the meal offering of remembrance, which is a meal offering of jealousy. And in the priest's hand shall be the water of bitterness that induces the spell. Okay, so now let's start to look at the Hebrew words because they're really interesting. They sound almost like an incantation. Me hamarim hama'ararim. So the bitter waters of cursing, let's say. And then verse 19, the priest shall adjure the woman, saying to her, if no man has lain with you, if you have not gone astray in defilement while married to your husband, be immune to harm from this water of bitterness that induces the spell. So again, you'll be clean hinaki mimei hamarim hama'ararim. Okay, so then 20. But if you have gone astray while married to your husband and have defiled yourself, if a man other than your husband has had carnal relations with you, and then 21, here the priest shall administer the curse of adjuration to the woman, as the priest goes on to say to the woman, may the Lord make you a curse and imprecation among your people, as the Lord causes your thigh to sag and your belly to distend. So it's not clear exactly what kind of punishment this is, but it could, some people think it's miscarriage. Other people think it's just this, this kind of gross, sort of bloating up of the woman's body. Then verse 22, may this water that induces the spell enter your body, causing the belly to distend and the thigh to sag. And the woman shall say, amen, amen. That's the only thing she does in this whole ordeal, right? She just says, amen, amen, right? Otherwise she's silent and she's being led here and she's being led there. And she really has no agency. The priest shall put these curses down in writing and rub it off into the water of bitterness, including the name of God, right? So the name of God is rubbed off into the water of bitterness, and that's what she drinks. So again, in 23, me hamarim, right? Macha el me hamarim, erased into the bitter water. He is to make the woman drink the water of bitterness that induces a spell. So this is really a mouthful. In 24, v'hishka et ha'isha et me hamarim ha'me'ararim uva hamayim ha'me'ararim le'marim. Wow. Then the priest shall take from the woman's hand the meal offering of jealousy, elevate the meal offering before the Lord, and present it on the altar. So there's more to this, but I think this is enough to give you a sense of how the ritual works, and also this kind of incantatory language, right? It's just this wild alliteration. Okay, so now I'm going to take some comments, and I'm hoping to do at least one more text with you. So we can stop screen sharing. Thank you so much, Michele, for saving the day. Okay, so again, I just want to repeat the practice. So please refer to either something someone said or a line or a word from the text and make one short point in response. That's our practice, right? Okay, so now I think, Kathy Lynn, are you still wanting to speak? Your hand was up beforehand.
Well, it was on the earlier text, so let's just pass it. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll read the chat afterwards, so I'd love to see everyone's comments. Okay, so Jay, Jill, Nehemiah.
I'm probably dreaming in Technicolor here, but as a modern, I'm wondering if part of the message is actually in the first part, venisterahi, the notion of secrecy and the idea of communication breaking down to the point where infidelity happens. And maybe that's part of what we today can draw out of this.
So communication breaking down, and somehow do you feel like this ritual restores communication? Oh, can you unmute Jay for just one more moment, Michele?
I think I stopped short of the ritual. I think by the ritual is to the point where communication is so broken down that you have to totally go outside of the relationship. So I'm just wondering about, as moderns, not getting to even that point.
Right. So yes. So working to find someone, not a priest, maybe a therapist, for 6 months before you have to get to this terrible, painful point. Yeah. Okay, Jill.
Okay, hi everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
I love the rule that you said at the beginning, and I'm going to stick with it. And so I just wanted to say, in terms of the text, I'm just piggybacking actually on what the last comment was, which is that it emphasizes that it's done in secret. So it doesn't even seem to be carte blanche against adultery. It's the secret that it entails. So, yeah, so whether we agree with the fact, which myself, I don't agree with the fact that this test only goes to the woman. The positive that I do get out of it is that it is saying that secrets are really harmful, and there needs to be a ritual to unearth, to unearth these secrets. And it's a blessing that we get to live the Torah today, where we have some different values than at that time, but we can still get the lesson from it.
Thank you, Jill. And I love that you used unearth, because that connects us to the poem, right? And we're going to see in a text we're going to look at in a few minutes. We're going to also connect to that sacred earth where the house once stood. So thank you for that. Okay, Nehemiah. Nehemiah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but I can't see your face.
You can see my face now, yeah?
Yeah. So remember the practice. What do you want to refer to in the text? Or something that someone said?
I'm referring to the text, to the sota. I know many more sotem than sotot. Men do it much more often than women, and nothing happened in this text.
Yep, absolutely.
When I was a celibate for a long period, all the sotim came to confess to me. So many of them. And I made a commitment that if I ever betray a woman, a girlfriend or a wife, I'll have to tell her. And I made this commitment. I was never able to betray my wife or any woman because I knew I have to keep this commitment. And that kept me straight. So maybe there's something about telling it, finding a way that for men and for women, that you have to tell it, that would keep it. And by the way, the last thing, some women forgive their men, and some women, even I know one Catholic, we are not supposed to divorce. Every man that betrays her, women have different response to this, and men have different response to it. When they find out, they either forgive and try to work it out, or they just say, that's enough.
Okay, thank you, Nehemiah. Margot. I don't hear you, Margot.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. Referring to the poem, "The Ruined House," is the marriage, and the doubt that can dig love back up into it is this ritual of the sota. The jealousy is the certainty that you're just consumed with this ruach, with this spirit. I'm sure she's wrong. It's just, I suspect it. And it's this ritual's role to cast love and doubt back in where the house once stood. Something new can grow, perhaps.
Beautiful, Margot. And let's remember that the Torah's like, maybe she's innocent, maybe she's not, right? Like the Torah doesn't have certainty. He has certainty. Exactly. I think that's a great point. Okay, Michaeli, let's screen share again, please. Great. So I'm going to look at two texts now, and then I'll take some more comments. Yeah, great. So for the sake of peace in the home. So this is actually based on a midrash in Numbers Rabbah and other places. In the case of the holy name inscribed in sanctity, Scripture orders that it is to be blotted out in water to bring about peace between a man and his wife. Sorry, this is Numbers Rabbah, and the next piece is Rabbi Nachman. In the course of the sotah ceremony, which determines whether a man was unfaithful to her husband, God's name is written on a shard of clay that is then dipped in water, causing the name to be erased. It is as if God is saying, my name, which was written in holiness, may be erased in order to bring out peace between husband and wife. So that's really interesting. It's a big transgression to erase God's name, right? We take holy books and we put them into a geniza, right? We don't just throw them out, right? So God's name is is sacred and we're to preserve it forever. But here, right, for this ritual, these commentaries are saying, God is willing to have God's name be erased. Which leads me back to the poem in the sense that when are we willing to put our egos aside? And what is the result of putting our egos aside? Okay, so now let's go down to one more text, and I'll take some more comments. So this is a fascinating Talmudic piece that I discovered sort of by accident. And it was so reminiscent of the poem that I had to sort of put it on the source sheet. And it also talks about Sotah. So this is about King David, who's preparing to build the temple, even though he's not the one who ultimately builds the temple. He wants to lay the foundation. And he asks his advisors and friends, he says, does anyone know whether it is permitted to write God's name on a shard of pottery so we could throw it into the watery deep and the waters will rest? And the reason he asked that is that as he's trying to dig in the place where the temple is to stand, he hits some aquifers and the lower waters rise up and make it impossible for him to lay the foundation. So no one responded to him. And David said, anyone who knows what to say and isn't saying it shall be hanged by his throat. It's a lovely method of eliciting information. So Achitophel, who's one of his most trusted advisors, makes an inference, right, from the Sotah. And the inference is from a lighter case to a more stringent case. He says, if in order to make peace between a man and his wife, the Torah says the divine name written holiness can be raised into water, how much more so in order to make peace in the whole world? So Achitophel said to him, it is permitted. So he can take God's name, write it on a piece of clay and throw it into the water, right? So he wrote the name on a shard and threw it into the watery deep, and the water receded 16,000 amot. When he saw that it had receded too much, David said, the more it rises, the more the world is moistened. I love that image, especially in conversation with our opening poem. He composed the 15 songs of ascents, Shir HaMalot, and the water rose 15,000 amot, remaining at 1,000 amot beneath the earth's surface. So it's so important that the waters of the deep stay at the right level, not too far beneath the level, beneath the earth, because then we'll have a, our world will be too dry, right? And not, it can't rise up because then we'll be flooded and we won't be able to sustain life. So David, through writing God's name on a piece of clay and throwing it to the water, somehow got the waters to behave, right? To act in a way that could both sustain having a Beit HaMikdash, right, a temple built, and having the world being sufficiently moist. Okay, so I see we can stop screen sharing. I see Neil Brodsky would like to say something.
Very beautiful. Want to raise the point here about balance, which is being brought up here. Just picked up Minyan by Rami Shapiro, and he talks about the practice of Gerushin in terms of immersion and submersion of the self, and using a phrase from Psalms or using Rabbanu Shel Olam or a mantra. And what I'm bringing up here is that in Sotah, we're looking at a craziness that happens, in the couple, in a sense, whether it's the husband's craziness or the wife's craziness, and we're dealing with trauma. And so from my standpoint here, or our standpoint, what we're really raising here is the possibility for us of neuroplasticity, of the ability to possibly use our own practice as a way to release ourselves from the place of imbalance in ourselves. That's the point. Thanks for letting me share.
Bill, that sounds very promising. Do you see something in the text that would sort of like lead us in a specific direction on that?
Could you ask that question?
What?
Help me out here in terms of your question. Just
in other words,
elaborate.
What in the text would lead us to, what in these texts would lead us to neuroplasticity? Like, what's your takeaway here?
Well, what I want to actually, then let me raise up the comment that was just made about being a modern. Being a modern here, what can we use in terms of practice? And this is a Hasidic practice, Gerushin, which for me, coming to Judaism from Buddhism earlier, I was not raised observant in a Jewish sense. So in terms of the text itself, and we're speaking about Sotah?
Well, any of these texts that we looked at today.
Okay, so, so I'm a couples therapist, in another life, right? And so, I see in myself and certainly in people who I work with, when there's difficulty in the couple, there's a tremendous holding that happens. There's a tremendous holding to a point of view. And so, when you look at something like potential infidelity, that's a place which breeds inability of the prefrontal cortex to operate. As Rabbi David has said, we go to a place in a much earlier part of the brain, which is fight, which moves us into fight or flight. So
I'm connecting the neuroplasticity and the hard trampled yard, and they seem to be opposites, and sort of the rigid roles that the husband and the wife potentially play, right? And then back also to Asher Chaim's point about, what kind of plowing are we doing, both in terms of text and relationally. Okay, beautiful, thank you. I like that plasticity, and it reminds me of porousness. How do we get to that porous place? Okay, Alana.
My comment, I think, flows well from what you just said, Rabbi Diane, and Neil as well. So the phrase, dig up the world, and then the ending of the Torah passage, elevate the meal offering, that where I want to go is to extend this beyond just the story of a woman possibly being judged to a kind of description of what healing can be, that we face that we dig up the world within ourselves, and that there's a kind of watering that can come through us, that's a kind of facing and being transformed by the kind of powerful responsibility that is mind and body, and that where this passage ends is that then there's this is a passage of transformation, and then we get to elevate, we get to bring back to that which is one and larger than us, and that there's a kind of potential for this powerful cleansing of ourselves and of the world.
That's beautiful, Lana. And sometimes I wonder how much work can we actually do in ourselves and on ourselves without a kind of communal ritual.
Yes.
What's the inner work and the work that we could, that we accomplish by simply going within, and what do we need to happen? What rituals do we need to happen in a communal context to really kind of shake things up, like shake up paradigms? I'm just wondering as I listen to your sort of, beautiful iteration of this process. Okay, Richard, and then Paul. Richard or Elizabeth.
I've been thinking about the image of a plow.
Yeah.
And there are places in the world, and in the United States in particular, where plowing the ground destroys it. So in the Midwest, in the plains, it took centuries and centuries, millennia, to develop a little bit of topsoil from the grasses and other things that manage to grow there. And if you plow the ground, when the winds come, they blow it away. That was one of the reasons for the Dust Bowl. So plowing itself has to be done, so you have to plant in holes. Natives knew that, but the Europeans who came here didn't have a clue. So you have to plow with great care and understanding about what it is you're plowing. And in terms of emotional or cultural differences that you explore. And it's, plow can be a blunt instrument or it can be a delicate one. And that's really critical in thinking about Amachai's poems. He is very careful, obviously, about the way he uses language and what a plow might signify for him. And about the nature of the sotah, which I think one of the reasons I get upset when I read that set of passages is that the sotah is such a cruel, blunt instrument. And it's not designed, obviously, to explore the woman's feelings at all. As you say, she has no agency in this ritual. So it's a very blunt, unpleasant plow as I read that text.
No, it's all about his jealousy. And
right.
I don't see this as, I'm resisting trying to redeem the text, because I love studying this book, and I want us all to learn something from every single text. And yet this is so cruel. I do wonder, though, if the extreme nature of his jealousy needs to be met with an extreme ritual.
About him, perhaps.
Yes.
Ritual. Not about her.
But potentially, maybe to save her life. But you see, I'm putting a positive spin on it. So I'm seeing myself wanting to put a positive. So I'm going to refrain and pull back and just say, yes, it's a very cruel ritual.
You want to read the
officer of agency.
Yeah, you want to read the text with a delicate plow. Thank you.
I'm trying. Okay, Paul and then Lauren.
So in the Sukkah text, David writes the name of God on this shard and throws it into the watery deep, and the waters recede. I think that's where the neuroplasticity is clear to me, because we have to think of, especially going to a Shemitah year, of there's the cosmos of the human being and the cosmos of the whole world. And the Sukkah text references both and goes to the peace of the whole world. And by throwing, this insane act that David throws God's name into the deep, I think this means that in order to find peace, we have to dare to efface our ego.
That's the practice that's screaming from these texts, to me at least. That's the practice, right? And what does that mean? It reminds me of a friend of mine who's the head of a very large Jewish institution who had to write, something to address what was happening in the Middle East. And she said, people are dying, and here I am wordsmithing.
Mm-hmm.
And do we have a perspective on what difference our words make and don't make? And what would it mean to sacrifice our ego? What would it mean? What would it mean? I think part of what it would mean in a conversation where we disagree with somebody is to actually truly listen, to put ourselves aside for a moment. But that can be so painful.
And again, I think that functions on the level of a relationship between two human beings and the relationship between us as humans and the earth.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So I want to sort of open up that question to all of us. Like, what would it mean to put our egos aside at this moment? What would it mean to, not have to be right? What would it mean to, blot out our names? And is that productive? It's a big question. We're not going to answer it in the next few minutes. And I do want to end with a story. So I'm going to take a bunch of comments from people who haven't spoken before. So I'm going to go to Eden, Lauren, Barbara, and I'm going to end with a story that I think may or may not be helpful. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I wanted to speak to something you just said about redeeming the text. And I think for me, sort of the redemption comes in like being in a community and having teachers where it's safe to say, I don't want to redeem the text, right? Like to just, that I don't feel pressure to find the good necessarily, that I can let it sit with me in the ways that it actually does, and see how it works on me, and see what comes from that. And if it's just that it's terrible and that I'm inspired to, work against terrible things in the world. And super quickly, when you mentioned this idea that maybe this was set up to save a woman, I had this like internal eye roll at first. But thinking about it, I think this is really connected to the way that women who were on trial for witchcraft were basically drowned. Like there was a ritual trial where women were put in water. If you floated, you were witch, and if you drowned, and you were innocent. And this, I feel like, effectively, I doubt many women were found guilty of adultery from this ritual, the way that it worked.
Yeah, if it ever happened, and
yeah,
it was typically discontinued in
right.
And I forget which rabbi said this, but they said there's so much adultery we can't possibly implement that.
Right. Like if it actually happened, I can imagine
right.
that maybe effectively it really did function that way. So that's really interesting.
The image that comes to me about wanting to redeem the text, and this is certainly, an impulse in me, is actually trampling the ground. Like the ground there's so many meanings that could emerge from this text, many of them negative, some of them possibly positive, but I almost have an image of like having to like sort of tamp down the ground or flatten it in order for it to be redemptive. So thank you, Eden. Okay. I think I said Lauren, Barbara, and then Richard, and then I'm going to end with a story.
So Eden, well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Hello, and brief comments, please, because we have to get to a bat mitzvah. Yeah.
Just to say that, Eden, I think you unwittingly redeemed the text, because at the very least, you put it in a historical context, right? This probably, we don't know. We would love to know what was the outcome of this ritual. I don't think we know. And yet we can see this ritual as part of a historical context. What came before? What came before? And is this ritual? I mean, I do, not that I care to hold this ritual up and redeem it, but I do want to ask, did it serve as any kind of protection?
So Lauren, we discussed that a little bit at the beginning. So I'm happy to discuss that, but I'm gonna move on.
All right, I missed that.
Okay, Barbara.
Okay, now you can hear me. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for this unredeemable text. No, just kidding. One thing that came to mind to me with this idea of throwing God's name into the water and all the things that respond, one of the things that happens, I think, in either jealousy or adultery is that, in fact, God isn't present because we've made ourselves God. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps the ritual is to show you that I'm going to throw it into the water and God isn't here. And then maybe at that point, everybody comes to their senses. So it's not, so it's kind of an opposite interpretation of what I think that means, throwing God's name into the water. When we throw God's name into the water, we have some problems.
So let me say what I think. Is everyone hearing me? Unfortunately, yes. Okay, now it seems to be okay. Excellent. So they think, or she thinks when she commits adultery, that it's in secret and that God is not watching. And this whole ritual can be, I think, Barbara, what you're suggesting is sort of restoring God's name to what is true about human experience, is that you can't hide from God. Okay, I love it. Thank you.
Yes, you can't hide from God, but you have erased God in your secretive behavior because you're not staying with God.
Yeah, beautiful. Richard, you had your hand up. I'd love to hear what you have to say if you'd like to say it.
I think I had something brilliant to say and I forgot it. Sorry.
Okay. Maybe
Next
that
time.
I'm thinking that maybe you just modeled what it means to to erase our names. Okay, I want to.
Well, we're a good team.
Yes, I'm going to end with a story, and I'm going to see. Oh, I can't put in the chat. Oh well, I thought I could. Yaakov, do you want to say something very quickly?
Yes, I do quickly. There's a pasuk that says hello. Can you hear me? Yeah. So there's a pasuk that comes to mind. The person said you can't hide from God. The last one, very beautiful comments. Great learning. The pasuk is Anochi omed beni uvenechem, which to me has always been an interpretation. Anochi is the ego. That is the ego is the thing that separate us from the divine, from God. So we're not hidden from God is not. We're not hidden from God, but we hide from God. We're disconnected from Him. That's the process of the whole process of this. It's the not listening, the being right. It's that process that we are. The ego is such a thing that disconnects us from our best self, the ownerless self that we talked about.
And God's first question to us is ayaka.
Yeah.
Like, where are we? Okay, I'm going to quickly go to the story. Thank you, Yaakov. So Rabbi Meir would teach a lesson in the synagogue every night of the week. And there was a woman who would come regularly to hear him. One time, the lesson lasted longer than usual. When she returned home, she found that the lights had burned out. Her husband said to her, "Where have you been?" She replied, "I was listening to the lesson." So she's insisting on going out every night and studying Torah with Rabbi Meir. He said, "May God do so-and-so if this woman enters this house before spitting in the face of the one who gave that lesson." So he's furious and he's testing her. Rabbi Meir perceived with the help of the Holy Spirit what had happened and pretended to have a pain in his eye. He announced, "Any woman who knows how to recite a charm over an eye, let her come and heal mine." The woman's neighbors said to her, "The time has come for you to return home. Pretend to be a charmer and spit in his eye." She came to him. He said to her, "Do you know how to heal a sick eye through making a charm?" She was scared and replied, "No." He said, "Doesn't it help to spit into the eye 7 times to heal it?" After she spit in his eye, he told her, "Go and tell your husband that although he only asked you to spit once, you in fact spit 7 times. So the disciples of Rabbi Meir are mad. They say to him, "You condone this disgraceful behavior towards the Torah." And he said to them, "Should the honor of Meir not be equal to that of his creator? Now, according to the Torah, the name of God, which is written in holiness, is to be blotted out in order to bring about peace between a man and a woman. Should not the honor of Meir be treated in the same fashion?" So I love that story. And I ask all of you, how might we lay down our honor, not in inappropriate ways, in appropriate ways, in order to contribute to peace at this moment in time? So thank you and Shabbat Shalom. I look forward to reading all your comments in the chat. See you in services.